Slavery is when one person controls another person through violence and threats and exploitation. And right now, in our country, human beings are the second most lucrative commodity in America. Let me just say that again. Human beings, behind drugs, are the second most lucrative commodity in the United States of America. And I mean human beings being bought and sold and used. Human beings. It's incredibly sobering. We begin to think about what has happened and what is the history of our own city here. When we look back at our sordid past of Seattle. And Seattle was founded by, of course, many pioneers that came here to establish a new frontier. And early on in the history of our city, when there was the gold rush in Alaska, and so many began to flock here in its infancy. Many males flocked here to get rich and go to Alaska and get gold. And early on in Seattle, the ratio of male to female was 10 to 1. 10 males for every female. Many city leaders in Seattle saw an opportunity. Saw an opportunity to make some money, saw an opportunity for pleasure. And so the sex trade began. Now we might think that was for another time or something for another place, but the reality is that it is alive, it's real, and it's happening now. Right now. In America, between 300 and 500,000 children are at risk every year of being exploited in the sex industry. In America, 1.5 million American men use women involved in prostitution each week, which is a business of $40 million a day, $40 million a day, bought and sold. And that statistic was from 1989. It was 21 years ago. Most have been abused by someone in their family or outside of their family at a young age. And we see what is happening now and how pimps in particular, what their strategy is to begin to lure them into this sort of life. And they come in and they exploit, they abuse, they use, they realize that these young girls are looking for security, they're looking for love, and they're exploited. The response to this is Jesus. That's the response. That's what needs to happen. We see that for you and I here, that those of us that haven't been treated with dignity and respect, and those we haven't treated with dignity and respect, it's the gospel that comes into the midst of our disgrace, because the gospel is grace. The gospel is grace. That God is not okay with what's going on. God is not okay with the brokenness. God's not okay with that. And that is the response, is the gospel. We see that grace that comes and heals and restores and renews and redeems. It's unconditional love. That's what grace is. And we see Christ on the cross bearing shame, bearing betrayal, bearing violence, bearing loneliness, bearing the things that people on our streets are experiencing, and you and I are experiencing. That it's the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is what renews and redeems. and restores